The 2022 MLB season isn't over yet. That's why we'd like to let off some steam about some players and teams that didn't live up to the mark. We can't be the only ones who expect more from these teams and players, which is why their performance only hurts more. In this video, we'll talk about the most disappointing teams and players of the 2022 MLB season. First off, Hunter Greene from the Cincinnati Reds. Spencer Torkelson, the first baseman for the Detroit Tigers, has already been named one of the biggest losers and biggest busts of 2022. That's why we think it's safe to say he's a dead horse who's had enough. Hunter Greene was BNOR's 13 prospects when 2022 started. Anyone who thinks he wasn't that bad back then is correct. The 23-year-old pitcher had a 1.01 ERA plus in 24 starts for the Cincinnati Reds. That's a little better than average, and there were times, like May 15th, and when his ERA in his last 5 starts was .62, when Greene looked like a rising ace. So it seems likely that Greene's fastball is what we're upset about. As thrilling as speed is, it doesn't mean much if a pitcher's fastball has a flat shape and stays in the middle of the strike zone too often. Before getting back on the hype train, we'll wait for Greene to fix those things. Up next, Josh Donaldson from the New York Yankees. We don't think we hated it when the New York Yankees and Minnesota Twins traded 5 players earlier this year. The former Vikings star didn't have a terrible first season with the Yankees. He was such a good third baseman that it was surprising that he didn't make it as a finalist for a Gold Glove award. Aside from that, yikes is an excellent word to use. That includes Donaldson's 1-game suspension in May for calling Tim Anderson of the Chicago White Sox Jackie during a game. With 1 year and a $29.8 million left on his contract, it's unlikely that the Yankees will be able to get rid of Donaldson. Followed by Javier Baez from the Detroit Tigers. Middle infielders who were free agents had a good offseason. Still, no one else's plan went as badly as Baez's based on what Baez had done in his previous 5 seasons with the Chicago Cubs and New York Mets. The Tigers could have expected him to hit for power and play Gold Glove defense. Instead, he had a 93 OPS plus and hit 14 fewer home runs than he did in 2021. Even though Baez's strikeout rate went up, his average exit velocity and percentage of hard hits went down. The defense of Baez, on the other hand, was fine in terms of outs above average, but awful in terms of defensive runs, saved, and overall zone rating. He made more throwing errors than anyone else in the major leagues with 17. Even though Baez still has 5 years left on his contract with the Tigers, the fact that this was his second bad season in a row and that he will turn 30 on December 1st isn't a good sign. Moving on to Nick Castellanos from the Philadelphia Phillies. The 30-year-old slugger was on top of the world when he agreed to play for the Phillies. In 2021, he played for the Reds and had already set several career highs. There were 34 home runs and an OPS plus of 138. A significant drop was from that to only have a 95 OPS plus and 13 home runs. At one point, he talked about the challenges of playing for a new team in a new city, but you wouldn't think those challenges would make his bat less powerful. Castellanos' average exit speed went down by 2.3 miles per hour compared to 2021, and the number of hard hits he got went down even more, from 46.9% to 34.6%. Castellanos still has a chance to change how his World Series season turned out, but he hasn't done much in the playoffs besides playing well in Game 1 of the National League Division Series. And get this, he's gone 9 for 41 and hasn't hit a home run. Next, Fernando Tatis Jr. from the San Diego Padres. Tatis' 2021 season ended badly when he and Manny Machado fought in the San Diego Padres dugout in September. He hit 42 home runs and stole 25 bases during the season. Then, in September, he was in a motorcycle accident that broke his wrist. In March, he had surgery to fix it. This put off his return until April 2023. The Padres should be proud that Tatis' saga never brought them down. Even if they didn't have one of MLB's best players, it'd be impressive for them to make the playoffs and beat 2 100-win teams while they were there. Still, Tatis will have a lot to do when he returns. He'll have to make peace with his teammates and prove that his early success, which made him one of the faces of MLB and earned him a $340 million contract, was real. That seems like a tall order, given that he'll return from a PED ban, surgery on his shoulder, and a second surgery on his wrist. Not to mention the Los Angeles Angels. You can laugh all you want, but the Angels seem to have a good chance in 2022 to end their run of 6 straight losing seasons. The Astros and the Angels were 11 games over .500 and fighting for first place in the American League West. What happened next was worse than a disaster. Before Joe Maddon was fired on June 7th, the Angels went 3-16. Then, under interim manager Phil Nevin, they went 46-60. In the end, they didn't make the playoffs, but they did have another losing season. But the Angels were never built for the long run, lacking both stars and depth, especially on the mound. Art Moreno's responsible for that, but he decided in August that he'd rather sell the team than try to fix it. Shohei Ohtani did the right thing by saying that the way the season went left him with a negative impression. Let's learn more about San Francisco Giants. After winning 107 games and stopping the Dodgers from winning the National League West for the 8th straight year, there was always going to be some kind of a letdown after that. But the Giants still had about a 50-50 chance of making the playoffs in 2022, only they lost 81 of 81 games and finished 30 games behind first place. Not everything was terrible. At the plate, Jock Peterson went from a player picked off the scrap heap to an all-star. Sadly, there wasn't much else good about San Francisco's season, especially not on offense, where the Giants hit 58 fewer home runs after leading the National League in that category in 2021. When Buster Posey retired in November, he took 18 of those with him, but his absence was felt in other ways. Even putting aside how hard it is to measure his leadership, the Giants did miss his skill at setting up strikes. Coming up, Milwaukee Brewers. The Milwaukee Brewers didn't win the National League Central from start to finish in 2021, but they almost did. They were in first place for 137 days and won 95 games to win the division title. Since they kept most of the same team that helped them do that, we had high hopes for them at the start of 2022. But what happened next was an 86-76 season that kept the Brew Crew from making the playoffs. Milwaukee's season has a "what are you going to do" feel to it, but it's also fair to say that the front office is trying to hurt the business. The team was 3 games ahead of the St. Louis Cardinals when it traded all-star closer Josh Hader to the San Diego Padres. The effects are hard to ignore, as Milwaukee's bullpen was to blame for 16 of the team's 29-31 record, which tied for the most in the MLB. Next, Chicago White Sox. When the season started, the Chicago White Sox were more than just the favorites to win the American League Central. So, how did they go 81-81 and finish 11 games behind the Cleveland Guardians? It'd be fair to blame the injury bug, which bit almost all of Chicago's key players at some point. They were never even close to being perfect. The fact that the White Sox didn't get what they wanted from too many players is also a big reason they lost. Finally, Boston Red Sox. Most of us didn't think the Boston Red Sox would even be in contention in 2021, let alone come so close to winning the World Series. And yet, that's exactly what they did. The run made them automatic candidates for 2022. By June, when the Red Sox were 11 games over .500, those odds were over 80%. Then Boston fell apart and lost 36 of its last 53 games. That was mainly because the team didn't have many good pitchers. As the season went on, the Red Sox had a more complex and challenging time keeping their pitchers healthy. After June, they had the worst ERA in the league at 5.37. Also, they did some self-sabotage at the trade deadline that reminded us of Milwaukee. When the Red Sox look ahead to an offseason that will leave their roster full of holes, it's hard not to think that they wasted a chance of being in the contention that won't come around again for a while. And on that note, that's a wrap for this video. Which of these teams and players was the most disappointing for you? Is there anyone we missed out on? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.